The rusted gate shrieked as Mark shoved it open, breaking the tranquil silence of the misty woods surrounding Briar Hollow Sanitarium. Mark stepped through first, his flashlight cutting into the dense fog, its beam bouncing off warped branches and forgotten stone paths. Clara hesitated behind him, hugging her jacket tightly as a sudden wind swept through, whispering like unseen voices. "Mark, are you sure this is a good idea?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "We don't need to do this, not tonight." Mark smirked, his confidence unshaken. "Don't tell me you're scared already. It's just an old building, Clara. Briar Hollow's been abandoned for decades. Sure, there's the stories, but that's all they are. Stories. I promise you, nothing's going to happen." Clara gave him a skeptical look, but followed him inside. She'd known Mark long enough to recognize his love for the macabre. Haunted houses, graveyard dares, urban exploring. He'd dragged her along on his adventures before, each time armed with folklore and ghost hunting gear. For him, places like the sanitarium were an irresistible mix of history and mystery. But tonight felt different. Clara couldn't explain it, just a gnawing feeling at the edge of her mind, like eyes watching from shadows she couldn't pinpoint. The sanitarium materialized from the fog, its hulking form a scar against the moonlit sky. Towering walls riddled with cracks bore signs of fire damage and decay. Shattered windows formed blackened squares that seemed to watch them approach. Briar Hollow had been infamous in its time, said to house patients deemed too dangerous even for other institutions. No family came looking for the vanished, no government records were kept. After its sudden closure 50 years ago, it faded into legend, shrouded in whispers of inhumane experiments and restless spirits. Mark held his flashlight high as they approached the front door. The heavy wooden frame leaned inward, rotting and splintered from decades of exposure. He gave Clara a quick, mischievous grin. "Ready to meet some ghosts?" Inside, the sanitarium was a graveyard of memories. Littered papers curled with age covered the floor, chairs lay overturned, and broken glass glittered like forgotten stars. The air was cold, heavy, and carried the faint scent of medicinal chemicals mixed with decay. Mark scanned the room, almost reverent. "Just look at it. You can feel the history," he seemed to say, his eyes wide with wonder. "Think of all the stories locked inside these walls. We're walking through time here, Clara." Clara muttered under her breath, her discomfort palpable. "Time that should have stayed buried," she seemed to say, as she rubbed her arms against the chill. They wandered deeper, with Mark using his flashlight and a chalk marker to keep track of their turns. Long corridors stretched into disorienting infinity, their plaster peeling like aged skin. Rooms branched off at random intervals, filled with rusted beds, shattered medical equipment, and the occasional graffiti from other trespassers. But then they found the basement stairs. Mark's excitement grew the further they descended into pitch darkness. His flashlight barely pierced the void surrounding them, and Clara stumbled nervously behind him, her hands brushing damp, gritty walls. The stairs echoed their movements, each step sounding sharper. Legend says the basement's where the experiments happened. His voice was no longer playful. It had adopted a somber edge. Patients kept in isolation, subject to insane treatments. Electroshock, lobotomies, sensory deprivation, even attempts at inducing psychosis. All in the name of research. Clara's stomach turned. She didn't want to hear any more. "Can we hurry up? I don't want to stay down here." They reached the bottom, stepping into a large room dominated by long metal tables, strange machines decayed by time, and shelves blanketed in dust. Two massive steel doors stood at opposite ends of the space, like guardians keeping whatever lay beyond locked away. "Unbelievable," Mark whispered, his flashlight exploring the room. "They say these doors contain the worst of the worst, the failed experiments, the ones who wouldn't stop screaming." Clara backed toward the stairs, her pulse quickening. "Mark, enough! Can we go now?" But he was already moving closer to one of the steel doors. His fingers traced its corroded surface, his eyes wide with morbid fascination. "Don't," Clara begged. "I just want to see," Mark replied, his voice almost hypnotized. He gripped the handle and pulled. At first it resisted, but the old stubborn mechanism gave way just enough for the door to creak open. A rush of icy air blasted outward, carrying a scent of rot so strong Clara gagged. And then came the whispers. Low, guttural, angry, the sound seemed to move through the room like crawling smoke. Mark froze, his flashlight flickering. The beam wavered, casting erratic shadows that seemed to dance around them. Clara screamed, clutching her heart, her face a mask of terror as the whispers grew louder, more insistent. "Mark!" she cried, her voice cracking as she reached out to him, desperate for him to respond. But he couldn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the shadows spilling from inside the room, shapes twisting violently against the walls. Then the whispers turned into screams, filling the air with a nightmarish cacophony that seemed to swallow them whole.